Easiest way to describe Intifada is terrorist attack. And you're about to take public transportation, you always look around because during the Intifada, they would have explosion on buses, restaurants. You don't want to sit next to the window because if there is a terrorist attack, that's where you're going to get most of the bombing.
When we had these indoctrinated religious extremists that were willing to kill innocent people, even if they died in that endeavor, it was like bad enough. But now we're not only dealing with them, but we're also dealing with educated Western people from free thinking countries, people who believe themselves to be, liberal or on the left. They think that they believe in freedom and equality and peace and humanity, but then they end up screaming genocidal slogans and in complete support, speaking in complete unison with the terrorists and the extremists who are religiously indoctrinated. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Miri Halpern. Miri grew up in Israel during the Second Intifada. She never realized she was traumatized because the abnormal was unfortunately very normal during that time. It was only after moving to the US to get her doctorate did she realize how the reality that she grew up in was different. And that's when she started to research trauma and how it's related to terrorism, and she wrote a therapy book for children who were victims of attacks. Miri is also the director of trauma training and services at Parents for Peace, an organization that we're going to talk a bit about today. It was started by the family of a young Black American man who was radicalized into Islam and committed terrorist attacks. After October 7th, when her community and her colleagues failed to see her pain and to stand with her, Parents for Peace stood up with Miri, the only Jewish member of the group, as they saw the pain and the importance of raising the voices of Jewish people. My goodness, Miri, you have been through a lot and you're using your trauma to help others who are actively in trauma right now. What an amazing journey you have been through. I'm really excited to speak to you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here and honored to be here.
So we're going to start off with some really bad memories. I want to talk to you about growing up during the Intifada in Israel. Now, this is something that I'd like you to speak on probably in more detail than you're comfortable doing, only because people so flippantly say things like globalize the Intifada these days. They're not really aware of, well, I hope that they're not really aware of what they're saying when they say these kinds of things. And of course, we're seeing the Intifada being globalized in your country, in America. You just had an attack in Boulder, Colorado, and then one in DC where 2 people were killed just a week before that. So tell us about what is the Intifada and what was it like growing up during that time?
Sure. The easiest way to describe Intifada is terrorist attack, in my opinion. For me, growing up, it was, when I went to the mall, for example, I always had to open my bag and people would check, do you have a bomb in your bag? Or when you're about to take public transportation, you always look around because during the Intifada, they would have explosion on buses, restaurants. You don't want to sit next to the window because if there is a terrorist attack, that's where you're going to get most of the bombing. Going just in the streets of Dizengoff, for example, in Tel Aviv, was dangerous during that time. So it's the idea of living constantly with this hyper arousal of what's going to happen next and how can I be safe. So one example I can give you is that when I was in high school, I think it was like my senior year, and on Fridays we would go to the beach because in Israel it's very close. You hop on a bus and 20 minutes later you're at the beach. And I have this very vivid memory of, we made these plans to go right after school, me and a few of my friends. And my brother came to pick me up. I have an older brother, and he came to pick me up from school. And he said there was a terrorist attack. And it was the bus that I was supposed to take to the beach that day. So it's really that feeling that it can happen to you any moment, any time, and you probably know someone who was injured or killed. So in the morning, it's opening up the newspaper and screening, like just scanning the names and the pictures of people. And do I know one of them? Did they go to my high school? Are they in my neighborhood? And unfortunately, I think what we're seeing today, and in my podcast, we interviewed my nephew, and he's a teenager, and he's going through exactly the same thing of that fear of who do I know. But I had no clue to your question about it. I was living in that world as this abnormal is my normal, not even realizing that I'm on a survival mode, that this hypervigilance that I'm feeling, this ongoing stress, is actually part of the problem. I only realized that after I moved here. I shared this story before with people, but I came here for my doctorate and I went to a party. And in Connecticut, they stopped the parties at 2 p.m., I think, or 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. And my instinct was to take cover because the lights went on. And I didn't realize that it was just that's when they end the party. The lights went on. And I took cover, and then I realized, okay, there's something wrong. I think I'm traumatized about what's going on.
Body just reacted, your muscle memory reacted. You've been trained in this, like you say, hypervigilance, hyper-awareness. So that's just your automatic response. Light goes on, quick, duck for cover. It's a terrorist attack.
Exactly.
My God.
And it's interesting because growing up, again, because I didn't think it was abnormal, I was one of those teenagers, and even before that, I mean, throughout my life, I was kind of like, I'm all about peace. So after Yitzhak Rabin was murdered, we had a name for like my generation. We were called the kids of light, or the kids, the candlelight kids, because we would go outside to the streets with candles and we would sing songs about peace. And to me, what's happening, connecting to what's happening right now, when people shout globalized Intifada, it's really hard to keep on that idea of peace and compassion and being able to hold that optimistic view, because globalized Intifada is what we saw in DC and what we saw in Boulder last week. That's what it means. It means explosion. It means attack. It means that ideology is taking over humanity, extreme ideology. And unfortunately, these days, it's under the cover of social justice. It's being normalized.
Yes, that is the true tragedy, because when we had these indoctrinated religious extremists that were willing to kill innocent people, even if they died in that endeavor, it was like, bad enough. But now we're not only dealing with them, but we're also dealing with educated Western people from free thinking countries, people who believe themselves to be, liberal or on the left. They think that they believe in freedom and equality and peace and humanity, but then they end up screaming genocidal slogans and in complete support, speaking in complete unison with the terrorists and the extremists who are religiously indoctrinated. I mean, you'd think that it would give them pause, when you are somebody who's educated at Columbia University and you are saying the exact same things as somebody who is a terrorist, then maybe that's a moment that you should take a step back and think about what you're doing. But it's been, unfortunately, as they say, common sense is not very common. It's been so pervasive, and I don't know what it's going to take. But thank you for sharing your story, because this is really important for people who are maybe mindlessly repeating these chants. Even when you chant from the river to the sea, they're chanting about Chaybat. Sometimes they'll straight up say gas the Jews, or when they say globalize the Intifada and they say, oh, Intifada, it just means fight. It's just resistance.
It's resistance.
Well, thank you for sharing with us, Miri. the truth of what this word means.
Yeah, it's not liberation, it's not resistance, and it's definitely not going to free Gaza. I think people don't understand what they're chanting. Another thing that's really interesting, Yasmine, is that my colleague Arno, who is a former neo-Nazi, he said publicly that what they're chanting today about Zionism and all of that is exactly what he used to say in the 90s as a neo-Nazi. It's the same thing, just you wear the clothes differently and you think that I'm not anti-Semitic.
100%. I've been saying that for years. When you see these Al-Quds rallies happening every year in every major city across the Western world, where they're screaming Khaybar, Khaybar, which is really a call to the genocide of Jewish people, and they're allowed to do that because they have hijabs on and because he's wearing a turban or whatever. So it's like, oh, these are just like ethnic people practicing, these are cultural practices, like it's not recognized, But when you had the people in Charlottesville with their torches coming out and saying Jews will not replace us, everybody reacted accordingly because they recognized it. They saw it and they're like, oh, this is horrible. This is evil. This is anti-Semitic. This is genocidal. Well, why do you see it when the white men are doing it and you don't see it when the brown men are doing it? It's the exact same thing, but they just have like this color blindness and suddenly they don't recognize that this is the same hate.
I 100% agree with you. The only caveat I would say that these days, unfortunately, it's even that is being normalized, even when it's coming from the right. When people justify the killing, for example, in DC, and saying, well, it's just they're Zionist. They deserve that. It's coming, unfortunately, these days from everywhere. But to your point, yes, I think there is something about this culture here that just doesn't understand the Middle East. And they try to westernize the Middle East without, especially on college campuses. They think they understand it. They think that when they say from the river to the sea, it's about resistance and fighting social justice. They have no clue what they're saying. They're saying, how do you say it in Arabic? Maila, maila, from water to water.
Maya, yes.
Maya. They have no clue what they're saying. It sounds cool. And it's also the cool thing today is to be a Jew hater.
Yeah. Yes. And you know when else it was cool? In the 1930s in Germany. This is what is really shocking is if anybody has like any modicum of historical understanding, they can see very clearly that we are living those days. We are living the years that led to the Holocaust. People think the Holocaust was just like one big event that happened on one day or something like that. Absolutely not. This normalization, this dehumanization, this normalization of hate against Jewish people, this dehumanization of Jewish people, this is what that means. This is exactly what was going on in that decade leading up to the Holocaust. We are living it now. And when people said things, you watched a movie about World War II and you thought, oh, I'm going to kill Hitler. If he was a baby, I would go back in time and blah, blah, blah. And everybody's got their stories. Oh, I would just be like, I'd be keeping Jewish people in my attic or under my floorboards. Would you though? Would you even speak up now on your campuses or in your workplaces or on social media? Would you even speak up for Jewish people? They think that they would do all of these things. Well, this is your opportunity now. You're living it now, folks. This is your chance to do all of those things that you said that you would do back in those days, because it's happening right now. And everybody knows it. I don't need to convince anybody of this reality. It is so unfortunately, blatantly obvious. In Canada alone, we have had surges of anti-Semitic attacks rise by 670%. I can't turn on my laptop without seeing some kind of attack happening in France, in London, in America, somewhere, right? Whether it's on a Jewish school, whether it's on a synagogue, or whether it's on actual Jewish people just walking around the city minding their own business. So, it's like the urgency is now. When some guy named Mohammed is trying to burn Jewish people alive in Boulder, Colorado, you realize the parallels to the Holocaust, and you have to start paying attention. This is it. This is the time.
I agree with you 100%. And as you were talking about it, a memory came to my mind. So I'm a third generation Holocaust survivor. And when you were talking about the Holocaust, what went through my mind is like, I am living my grandparents' history.
Yeah.
I mean, this is as it's in the making. We see it's happening in front of our eyes. And when you said who would speak up, a lot of Jews are now asking who would hide me. And as a Jewish person, you know exactly what it means. But I don't know if other people understand the significance of that, because it seeps into every single day of our lives. I'm a trauma expert, and I have nightmares, not just about October 7th. Just the other day, I had this dream and I woke up like terrified because I dreamt that I was in my car and I was driving to pick up my kids, and I got into an angry mob of pro-Hamas supporters. And in my dream, I had this little sticker on my car of an Israeli flag, and they start banging on my car. And I was looking in the back of my car, and I saw my kids. I have a young kid. I have a car seat, and I was looking at it, and then like I just woke up. But this is what's happening. And people are not understanding that it's really not just about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. This is what's happening here for Jewish people. This is intergenerational trauma that's being activated for us on a daily basis. So it's intergenerational trauma. It's October 7th and it's October 8th and everything after October 8th that we're facing. It's the silence, it's the denial, it's the physical attacks, but it's also what is the community doing? Why do we don't have more allies speaking up? Not just standing with us, standing for us, speaking up in front of us, defending us. Because right now it feels really lonely. It feels like running a very lonely marathon by yourself, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that intergenerational trauma, that's what led you to focus on children in your therapy with writing a book about children and going through traumatic experiences. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I moved to the US about almost 17 years ago for my doctorate. I really wanted to have a clinical psychology doctorate, deciding we don't have it in Israel. And again, it's also related to my history. Both of my grandparents, both sides, are Holocaust survivors. And for my mom's side, my grandmother was all about you need to be a doctor, because she was denied the opportunity to go to college because of the Holocaust. And her father, when he died from the bombing, he told her, if I survive the Holocaust, I will send you to college. And he died. And she was able to escape. They came to Israel, but she was never able to go to college. So I knew I had to fulfill the dream and become a doctor. My other grandmother wanted me to become a professor, so I'm still working on that. But I knew that I needed to get this higher education. So I moved here for my doctorate, and I had that event that I mentioned before about realizing that I have trauma. So I connected all the dots and I want to do something meaningful because of my history. And how do I bring my clinical expertise to everyday life? On top of that, I met my husband in my second year of school, and his father was a victim of 9/11. So the whole concept of terrorism was just embedded in me from my history and then from my husband's history. And I wanted to work with intervention. So I created a children's book that is based on evidence-based interventions that I know from the world of trauma. I researched what are the best tools to help someone who was traumatized, but also use bibliotherapies and more scalable, affordable approach for kids. And I wrote this book for kids who were affected by terrorist attack. And it was published in Israel. It was published here. And the interesting piece about the book is that in Israel, there was no issue. It was published because everybody knows there's terrorism in Israel. I tried to publish it here initially, and I was told that there's no terrorist in the United States. That was before the Boston Marathon. And they asked me to change the title of the book to A Book for Children Who Experience Trauma. So I changed it. But then the Boston Marathon happened, and I was able to use the book with one of the people that were affected by the bombing. But I think it speaks to the lack of awareness, and I don't know if it's denial. Maybe people just don't want to admit that what's happening is happening all over the world and everyone can be affected. But the story is about, it's a very interactive story. It's about a journey of a puppy named Billy that goes to find a superhero to save his town from the bad guys, the terrorists, and it's about exposure to the red color alarm that in Israel is very known. When there is a missile attack in Israel, you have 90 seconds to get to a safe place. There is a red color alarm all over Israel or in that affected area. So people know what it means. I wanted to do it very specific as part of trauma work. You wanted to do exposure to the triggers of the trauma. So he goes through this journey to find a person or someone to save his town and help. And through this journey, he meets a lot of different creatures that teach him different strategies: mindfulness, exposure, relaxation, communication. And the end of the story, he realized that he has the power inside of him, and with the help of his family, he can combat hate.
I love it. I need that book. That's not just for children, it's for all of us. We all need that. That's fantastic. What's the title of the book?
Becoming a Superhero, a book for children who experience trauma, or a book for children who experience terror if you're buying it in Israel.
Yeah. I remember when I was in Israel seeing a playground that had bomb shelters in it. They were painted with like Smurfs and stuff on it, so it would be like, so the kids wouldn't notice, I guess, the reality of it. But how heartbreaking that even in a playground, you have to make sure that you've got bomb shelters, because 90 seconds, there's not enough time, right? So they're everywhere. They're all over the city, all over the country. And so, yeah, it was really especially heartbreaking to see it in playgrounds.
Yeah. Every school, every apartment, every house, they only I mean, when I go back to Israel to visit my family, we stay with my parents, and my kids sleep in the safe room. It's a room in the house. It's just part of the reality. People don't understand that.
Yeah. And you shouldn't have to understand that either. That's the thing, is like this is so inhumane that the way you described growing up in, during the Intifada it's so, demoralizing for us to be living in this world where we have normalized that, where that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so sad. Even Israel right now, I mean, this has always been the history of your country, the history of your people, is just this in constant danger, under constant threat. I've got a friend who's in Tel Aviv now. She's from LA, but she's in Tel Aviv now, and she's constantly having to run to the shelter because there's bombs coming from Yemen, there's bombs coming from Syria. She's not used to this. She wasn't born and raised in Israel. So for her, every single time is really, really traumatizing. And then she goes there and there's all these, she's like, there's all these sweet women speaking to me in Hebrew, and I don't understand what they're saying, but they're all very like kind and chill and relaxed and calming her down. You know what I mean? Like, they're just used to this. This is everyday life. And I'm like, what a fucking tragedy that they are used to it, Like, at least the fact that she's still shocked by it is in some way better, because it hasn't been seeping like you have in that, cortisol-laden hypervigilance. So it's just so sad.
Yeah, I mean, my parents call me almost every night from being awakened by Yemen missiles. It became a joke at this point. I see the phone call from them, like, oh, they woke you up again. But that's how you cope with it. And I think what Israel is doing really smartly is community resilience. So from a very young age, because this is a reality that has been there forever, they really invest the energy and the money in creating a generation that is resilient. And it's starting in kindergarten. They create those songs where you go to the safe room, you sing to yourself, and they're using the power of doing as a way of combating that visceral reaction you might get. And I think that's why if you go to Israel and you've never been in Israel, then you have that feeling like, wow, everybody's in the street. Everybody is like out in the coffee shop or at the beach. And I think part of it is in the DNA of Israelis and maybe Jewish people in general, where we would not let them win. We have to keep living. We have to keep going, because if we stop, well, then what?
Yeah, and there's no question that you definitely feel that resilient spirit when you're in Israel. Absolutely. It's so overwhelmingly motivating to be in that energy. As somebody who is also in the same boat, insofar as the same people that want you dead want me dead. So that's why it feels so great to be there and to feel so proud of your resilience and to be surrounded by so many other people who share that same, desire to fight back against hate with love and music and poetry and art. And it's just amazing. I mean, just the Nova Festival alone, going to the memorial there and seeing how there was a tree planted for every soul that was lost on October 7th. I mean, that's just the Israeli spirit right there. You're going to take such a dark day and we're going to replant, we're going to regrow, and this will flourish as a forest soon, and it's not just the story of Israel, it's the story of Jewish people across time, unfortunately. So, and you know what? This is the sad thing that people need to understand. Sam Harris said it best. He said this like 10 years ago. And at the time I was like, okay, Sam, let's calm down. Like, that's a little hyperbolic, but boy, was he prophetic when he said, all of us are living in Israel now. It's just that some of us haven't realized it yet. And wow, are those words ever ringing true right now? People can think, oh, it's just Zionists. Oh, it's just Jews. Oh, it's just Israelis. No, it's not. It's you. You're going to have your turn too. Everybody's going to have their turn. They're just the canaries in the coal mine. So you want to turn your back now and you want to dig your head in the sand now. That's fine. Keep your head in the sand, leaves your ass up in the air, ready for whoever wants to attack you. So, it's like people their cowardice is going to be their downfall.
I think the Jews sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. You go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, I was thinking what you're saying about I feel like it's always been the Jews, right? I mean, when you think about Parents for Peace, for example, the organization that I work with, every single call that we get to our helpline, it doesn't matter if it's the far left or the far right, whatever call we're getting has anti-Semitic content into it. So it's the connective tissue across all radicalization, all terrorist groups. It's always been the Jews. And you can say it's anti-Zionist, but then why would you target a synagogue here in the US? Why would you go after the ones who look visibly Jewish if it's Zionist?
Yeah, there's no question. And I mean, even if it was Zionist, it's still evil what they're doing, right? Like but like, let's not pretend that this is some political disagreement. You're absolutely correct. Let's talk a bit more about Parents for Peace. So I did mention that the organization started up because of a Black American family whose son converted to Islam and was involved in terrorism. And tell me a little bit more about Parents for Peace and about your work with them.
Sure. So yes, it started by the Bellows family. Their son gradually converted that they didn't even know. So it caught them by surprise. There were, from what I don't know the family myself. I heard the stories from Miriam Churchill, who is the executive director of Parents for Peace. But what caught him by surprise is how quickly it became into hate. And they had a travel company, and all of a sudden he refuses to drive Jews, and he would make comments about Latinos or LGBTQ. he became pretty radicalized. And initially, he wanted to conduct a terrorism against Jews specifically, and then he ended up killing a few people in front of the United States military recruiting office. So he's still in prison for life, several lives. So his father, he started this organization, and he reached out to Miriam Churchill, who has an amazing story. So Miriam, she grew up in Morocco, also came from a radicalized environment. She's Muslim, and she experienced anti-Semitism as a Muslim because of her name. And I guess they thought she looks Jewish. She has curly hair, and the kids would go after her and throw rocks at her, and will call her, "Here comes the Jew, the Jew." And she would say, I would look around, it's like, who's the Jew? Where are they looking? Like, and then she realized it was her. So she became very fascinated with why do people hate? What leads people from hate into radicalization? And when she and the father started the Parents for Peace, she actually went all around the US and Canada and interviewed families of terrorists to understand what's behind it. So Parents for Peace it's a nonprofit, and there's a helpline where people can call, and if they're worried about their loved one being radicalized, and we provide interventions. We have former extremists in our crew, and they're combined with a social worker or a psychologist to provide interventions for the family and for the individual of concern, and trying to really get people out of the radicalization cycle. And then we also do training for law enforcement and schools and colleges about signs of radicalization and what can be done about it. So fast forward, I never heard about Parents for Peace. And after October 7th, I became back into my fight flight mode for a little bit, and then realized I'm a doer, so I need to do. So my coping with October 7th was that I wrote a message on an Israeli Facebook group saying, I'm a trauma expert. Here's my cell phone number. If you need me, give me a call. And I got flooded with phone calls, and quickly was able to mobilize a team of clinicians. And for about a year or so, we provided free support, one-on-one, group, seminar, webinars. If there was a need, we gave people the option to come and talk. And Parents for Peace heard me on one of my talks, and they reached out to me. And Miriam actually told me, you don't have to fight alone. So I'm the only Jewish person over there. And those are the people who give me hope, because a lot of people in my community failed me and they did not stand up for me. And what I've learned from Parents for Peace, so as a reminder, I was always on the intervention side of things. I was helping traumatized individuals. But what I realized from them is that there's a lot we can do with prevention as well. And especially these days when radicalization and anti-Semitism, or I would call it Jewish racism, has been pandemic, it's been everywhere. We have to think about it in a global way and how to prevent it as a public health concern. From policymakers to law enforcement to school to education, this is the only way to be able to combat what's been in the move for over 30 years. I mean, Hamas has been there for the long run. For those of you who didn't watch October 8 movie, the documentary, this has been documented by the FBI, that what we're seeing right now on college campuses and in the street is not a result of October 7th. This is just the aftermath. What's been happening has been there for over 30 years, when they specifically, brilliantly, were deciding to change the American public opinion and said, this is what we're going to say to the left, this is what we're going to say to the right, and this is how we're going to put our messages out there, specifically in the academia. So I did not know that. I'm what we call like an October 8 activist. And I feel like every American, every person in the world should know that. So to your question, this is Parents for Peace. And like, to give you an anecdote, so when the Bibas family bodies were returned, it was one of the most emotional days. It feels like, again, it sits back on this intergenerational trauma. And every time something big like that happened, it brings you back to October 7th. That happened when they found out about the bodies of the 6 hostages. And one of them was the American one, Hirsch Kohlberg. Again, we're all back to October 7th. Because we know it could have been any one of us. For us Jewish people, we know. Just like when the attack happened in Boulder and the attack that happened in DC, every Jewish person puts himself in that same kind of like shoes, because we knew it couldn't be one of us. None of the people in my regular community mental health community, well, actually one person reached out to me, a non-Jewish person, to ask me if I'm okay. At Parents for Peace, that following day on Friday, we usually have a 2-hour meeting, and they decided those 2 hours are going to be about talking about how we're feeling about what happened. And every one of them cried. And every one of them asked me, what can I do to help you? What do you need from me to support you? Because they get it. Because people that were in it gets it. People that understand hate and have been able to get out of that cycle understand what's been happening here. They're awake. They're not woke.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the tragedy of this whole thing, is that you have the experience of the Intifada. I have the experience of being married to a terrorist. So when October 7th happened, it's like we unfortunately saw this evil before. We recognized it. We know it. You know what I mean? But when I tried to speak about it, I was being silenced and being called an alarmist and a conspiracy theorist, because the people who were saying that to me have the privilege of not knowing what I'm talking about. They have the privilege of not having experienced an intifada, of not having experienced October 7th. They didn't experience September 11th. They don't understand what I'm talking about or what you're talking about. And so it all seems very, very over the top, alarmist. In fact, I had somebody who was booked to come on my podcast. Her name is Sarah Edmondson. She's one of those October 8th Jews that we talk about. So she's a Canadian woman, cult survivor from the Nexium cult. And she's Jewish, yeah, but not really practicing. Her husband's not Jewish. Her kids are kind of Jewish. Like, it's just like this cultural thing in the background of her life. But then what happened was I was asking her to come on my podcast to talk about her survival from the Nexium cult. And so she was doing her research on me, and she was listening to my interviews and stuff like that. And she's like, wow, this girl is just like, she's a hothead. Like, she's just, what is she talking about? And then October 7th happened before she ended up coming on my podcast. And the day that she came on, she was like, oh my God, Yasmine, I absolutely had no idea. Like, when I was watching your interviews and researching for this, I thought that you were such an alarmist, and now I get it. Today, I understand. Now, every single word that you said, every single syllable, it's in my heart. Like, I get it. And I was like, this is the tragedy. Like, we have to, why do we, it's just so sad that we have to experience it ourselves before we can understand it. Like, I really wish that I could somehow convey these realities into people's hearts and minds so that they don't have to experience it. Because trust me, everything you were just talking about, Miri, all of this, work that you have to do to overcome trauma and the hypervigilance and the hyper awareness and like, you don't want to have to do that. That is a lot of work, and that is years of work. So if you can somehow learn from these people that are trying to tell you their stories so that you don't have to experience it yourself, like, trust me, we are doing you the biggest favor by putting ourselves out there and trying to convey these messages to you, because we don't want you to have to experience it, but the sad thing is, you got such support from the people who are part of Parents for Peace, because they get it. Their hearts have been shattered as well, and their minds to a certain extent, and so we're like we're living on this world on a different plane from the rest of the people who are privileged to have seen evil and to have never experienced that malevolence in their lives. I envy them in so many ways, and I hope that they can stay that way. But, unfortunately, there's no way for them to break out of their safe comfort zone until it hits them personally, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's why history is going to keep repeat itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about your work with traumatic invalidation.
Sure. So, like I said, after the 7th, I started seeing people that were affected by October 7th. And as a trauma therapist, I know that the best antidote for trauma is doing. So I was doing. It was my way of survival, giving meaning, giving purpose, and a sense of belonging. So I started seeing all those people. And I heard those stories that were very familiar to me from my trauma world, my non-related October 7th trauma world, of I'm sharing my pain and people are telling me it's my fault. Or they're telling me, well, what about the people in Gaza? Or there's this denial or politicizing or just silence. And what I've been hearing is that this, like that October 8 effect, has been more traumatizing for people sometimes than actually October 7th was obviously super traumatizing, but that extra layer was what's preventing them from healing because there was no acknowledgement of the pain.
Because it shatters their illusion too. It shatters their illusion because they're like, I live in America in 2023, like everything's safe. There's no anti-Semitism doesn't exist. And then suddenly they're like, what the heck is that?
Exactly. And it's coming from people around them, from their community, from institution. So when it's coming on that social level, it can create an existential crisis. Now, this is a known phenomenon that was, I did not coin the traumatic invalidation term. This is known from the trauma literature for years now, that when someone is denying your trauma or give you this whataboutism, then it's harder to heal from trauma because you start questioning your feelings, your thought, your environment, your sense of self, basically. And I went through that after October 7th. I remember the first month, because I've been hearing all of those, this is all your fault stuff. I looked at Derek, my husband, and I said, I think I'm going crazy. Like, I feel like everything I grew up on was maybe wrong. Maybe my reality is not accurate. Maybe my parents lied to me. And I grew up in Israel, I'm Israeli. Like, I know my history because I was there through the wars. I was there through the Intifada. I lost friends. And I was questioning myself. So I did this deep dive just to reinforce that what I grew up was actually true and that my history was not erased. But that's the phenomenon of what's happening with traumatic invalidation. So I start collecting all those stories, and I end up after a year published a paper that with my co-author Jackie Wolfman, and it went viral. And I think the reason it went viral, we had over 20K views in less than 2 weeks. And I've been getting emails from all over the US and Canada of people saying, I cried when I read the paper. I finally feel seen. This is exactly what I was trying to explain to people. And I didn't have the words. Thank you for acknowledging my pain. And I think that's why it went viral, because people needed that stamp of approval. It was very important to me specifically that it was not going to be in a Jewish journal. I wanted a peer review academic journal because I knew that people are going to find a reason to invalidate the paper because I'm a Jewish Israeli person. So after it took a year and a lot of peer reviews and revisions, and I'm very proud of it, mostly because it made a difference. Like a small anecdote, it was in a listserv of clinicians, and the mental health field has been brutal for Jewish people, brutal, unfortunately. And someone who's not Jewish, their response after reading it said, I was able to broaden my ability to understand why anti-Zionism is painful, and I can validate Jewish people, my Jewish patient, better now. And that's all I needed. I needed people to acknowledge the pain. I need them to be able to understand that you don't need to argue with me if it's anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. You can call it aliens. I don't care how you call it. If I'm telling you I'm not feeling safe and you're hurting me and you're hurting a part core of my identity, that can be traumatizing. Just like if I was part of the LGBTQ community and you were telling me there's no space for me here because I'm transgender, and there's only, it happened actually in Massachusetts. In one of the schools, there was a kid that was expelled from school because he came with a shirt that says there's only 2 genders. And he tried to sue the school and he lost. And the judge said, it's because you're hurting someone's core identity. Well, you're hurting my core identity. I don't care what you call it. It's painful.
I actually would love for you to do similar research on ex-Muslims.
I would love to.
Because we are your poster child for traumatic invalidation. Like, if you're looking for research on this topic and you're looking for people to speak to on this topic, that is literally what we breathe, drink, eat, sleep, live. That all we're doing is being invalidated constantly, left, right, and center. Our trauma is never recognized, and all of everything you just said, the victim blaming that goes on, right? The whataboutism that goes on. You can just imagine what it's like for us. And that same feeling that so many Jews felt on October 8th in their progressive circles that they have been championing and supporting and working with for decades. And then to find that these same people that they have been blood, sweat, and tears hitting the pavement, working with for so long, turn their backs on them like that. That is exactly what happens to ex-Muslims as well. We also feel that betrayal. We also feel that knife in our backs every single day. We can't tell our stories. We can't write our books. We can't express our voices. We can't show our faces. This is a constant issue for us because we're being silenced not only by the people in our community who want us killed,
Yeah,
but it's also the people outside of our community who just feel uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable, and it's icky, and it's Islamophobic, and it's bigoted, and it's racist, and it's mean, and they're a minority group, and you know? So at the very least, with Jewish people, you have each other. You know what I mean? Like, you have your own communities, you've got your Shabbat dinners that you can go to, you can support each other. Who do we have as ex-Muslims? We don't have families. We don't have communities. We don't have a support system. We're just being invalidated from all angles. So yeah, I applaud you in the work that you've been doing. And I definitely think that the progression of your research on traumatic invalidation, I hope, will include ex-Muslim people like myself.
I would love to do that because this is not just a Jewish problem. I mean, when you think about what's happening right now, when you start tolerating any type of hate, and when you start looking at a hierarchy of who's suffering more, and you put it under politics, you put it under religion, you put it under ethnicity, you're losing humanity. If you're seeing people as problem, then you're dehumanizing them. And we know from history, when you start dehumanizing people, you're letting hate flourish. Guess who's going to come in and take advantage of you? They're radicalized.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Miri. We're going to take some questions and comments from people who have joined you here to chat with you. And we're going to start with the lovely Courtney from Australia. Courtney, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Hey Yasmine, hey Miri. It's really nice to be here, and I've really enjoyed hearing your conversation. My husband is Israeli, and I've been saying in the chat that he grew up, and it was very normalized that you go to the mamad. They had gas masks at one point, and for him this is all normal. And when I met him, I was like, that's crazy, because I grew up in Australia. So I'm definitely going to tell him about your kind of trauma from this. I think it's super interesting, and I think he's definitely got some. So I just wanted to kind of touch on the fact that during these protests, with all these people doing these chants about, from the river to the sea, blah, 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 like, rape is resistance. A lot of it's coming from the younger generation, like a lot of the Gen Z. People are really into it. And even in Israel, you're seeing the younger generation of Israelis like trying to be like, not volunteering to go to the army. They're going, they're specifically going to military jail because they don't want to get involved. And I was wondering if you think this comes from the disconnect that a lot of these younger generations haven't experienced a massive terror attack to the scale of 9/11, and even the young Israelis yes, they had October 7th, but they never lived through the Intifadas. They never had this constant looming threat of like getting onto a bus and it blows up. So do you think it's because they've never experienced a terror threat to the level that us older generation have lived through?
It's a great question, Courtney. If you're talking about outside of Israel, I would say yes. Like there is this, like we talked about before, there's lack of understanding because there's also lack of exposure, and people think that they're fighting social justice. And I mean, you see it from some groups that claim to represent Jewish people, and they're not, like Jewish Voice for Peace, which just tokenize the idea of Jewishness, even though most of them are not Jewish. But that's a whole different story. I think that Israel is a bit different. So part of being Israeli, from the majority of Israelis, we're very proud of our country. We're proud of serving at the Israeli Defense Force. And notice it's called Israeli Defense Force. It's not called the military, right? And in fact, if you're not serving, it's mandatory to serve, for those of you who don't know, but if you don't serve, you're like, oh, why did you serve? I think what you're seeing right now, and it's actually not as popular as people think. People are actually still volunteering a lot. There is October 7th it broke the trust. It broke the contract between the Israeli government and the citizens. And not to get too much into politics, I think that's what's driving it. Until the hostages are back, until we restore the trust and know that the government will do everything in their power to get the hostages out and to minimize the killing that's happening on both sides, honestly, then I think it's going to be really hard to move forward. I think right now in Israel, there is politically, it's just hard. There is a lot of discourse. And I can say that as an Israeli, I can criticize my government because it's a democratic country. I can absolutely criticize it. And it doesn't make me anti-Semitic. I think that's what people don't understand, that you can be absolutely critical of the Israeli government and still not be anti-Semitic. But unfortunately, if I would go, like if I'll protest, let's say, in the United States against Netanyahu, then automatically they will think I'm against Israel. I'm not against Israel. But people cannot differentiate those two right now. So to your question, I think part of it is exposure, but part of it is just a reality of what's happening right now, because I don't think Israelis, even though like the young generation, maybe they didn't go through 9/11 or Intifada, but there's so much terrorist attack happening on a daily basis in Israel throughout the years that they were definitely exposed to some of it. Maybe it's been normalized a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree. I think obviously the bigger problem is the Westerners who have never lived under that threat and they cannot understand that. And yeah, I do agree that there's been this break of trust between the government and the people of Israel, especially because so many people have been in Miluim for such a long time. And obviously the Israeli government are not interested in bringing the hostages back at this point. It's not a massive thing for them, not to get into politics, but I definitely agree with you. I just think there's this massive trust issue in Israel right now. But thank you very much for answering the question.
I just wanted to add to that too, Courtney, and I'm sure you already know this, but maybe for people listening, Israel is such a small country that October 7th touched every single Israeli citizen and beyond, the ripple effect, right? Like people in Canada, members of their family were affected on October 7th. So it's like it was maybe not to the scale of 9/11, like you were saying, as far as like the death count, but the size of America and the size of Israel, right? Like we're talking two completely different sizes here. So there's not a soul in Israel and beyond, like I said, Jewish people across the world that wasn't affected from October 7th. So if that's what's required, unfortunately, then I think that they did experience it.
To your point about it, like, so my husband, again, lost his father on 9/11, said that in his opinion, October 7th was even more brutal than 9/11. Okay, back to your saying also the size of Israel compared to the United States and how many people were affected. There was something so brutal and evil and specific about the way Hamas conducted that war. That, from the trauma lens, when you think about exposure to trauma, you have direct versus indirect exposure. And I would usually say if it's indirect exposure, then the effect is not going to be as big. They filmed everything. So even if you're not in Israel, you are, and you watch what was happening, it's almost like as you were there. So the whole concept of indirect versus direct exposure disappeared. Everyone were affected because we could have seen it as live as it was happening, and we could think ourselves as if it was happening to us.
Yeah. I left Israel 3 days before October 7th happened. We just got back to Australia, and it was just surreal. And my father-in-law went to 10 funerals in the week after October 7th, because he did a lot of work in the South. So I agree. Every Jew in the world was touched by it in some way. So I guess it's crazy, like seeing some young Israelis, like you said, it's not as popular as we might think, just completely denying the fact that this even was like a big deal. So yeah, it's really tough. It's really hard for everyone.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to go to Mars. Mars, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Yasmine. Dr. Halpern, I have a question for you about the general state of the mental health of your community. I have seen the October 8th documentary, and I was actually involved myself in trying to help promote another documentary last year to get the word out. That's what has been fueling the anti-Semitism. Now, I heard that just getting people to see the October 8th doc was like trying to pull teeth, and we definitely experienced that in my own team's efforts when we heard some of the most ridiculous excuses for people not wanting to. I see you've experienced that too. The apathy we're seeing right now is, well, what can I say? It's just gross. And with the recent attacks, especially the one that happened in Boulder, Colorado last week, I've been seeing a lot of like messaging going back and forth between so many Jewish community members and friends I know about the need to arm themselves. And that just really, really angered me, because how do we get to this point where we have so much fear in our community that they feel the need that people will not protect them? I'll get right to my question. I know you're a therapist and you can't talk about anyone's personal story, but surely you must have seen a lot of people who've needed to speak about what has happened and what's been going on. So, may I ask about what the general sentiment in the community is like? I think the answer is fairly obvious, but like what is not obvious is how the external world is perceiving it. I feel people need to know about it.
Yes, no, thank you for the question, because a lot of the advocacy that I do is actually about raising awareness to the mental health aspect of Jews in America and how we're experiencing that. So I work a lot with the K to 12 and with their parents. And what I've been seeing in my clinic is actually trauma response. So post-traumatic stress, even though they were not part of it, because there's this hypervigilance that's constantly going on, a lot of school avoidance, ongoing anxiety, isolation, being afraid to leave their house. I mean, I can tell you that after the DC murder, I had phone calls literally half of the day of just trying to calm down my patients because they were afraid of leaving their house. There is a sense of I'm alone and nobody would protect me, to a point about why they might feel like they need to arm themselves, hiding their identity. So there is for some people, it's like a shame of being Jewish. Like, maybe if I'm not going to be visibly Jewish, then maybe they're not going to attack me. I had a client that she identify as religious. She used to go to synagogue, a temple with her parents. She would wear a Star of David. And she got harassed so bad in school that she stopped wearing her Star of David. And she told her parents she doesn't want to be Jewish anymore. And the community that is actually being targeted the most are Israeli immigrants. So in Massachusetts, we have a lot of Israeli immigrants because they come here for like a year or so for postdocs with the parents. And think about it, they have this double trauma. So they have the October 7th effect of probably knowing people who were killed. And then they come here as immigrants for a year or so. They go to schools here, and they've been called baby killers. and that what happened to them is justified. I had a 16-year-old boy in my clinic that his brother is still in Israel fighting in the army, and he was bullied at school, and they called his brother baby killer, and that his brother deserved to die. When they were talking about the Middle East conflict, when talking about the war at school, his teacher told him that he needs to leave the classroom because it's going to be too emotional for him to stay in. So again, it's coming from teachers, from friends, from community, and you just feel like you don't know who you can trust, which is really difficult. I mean, even the silence, you don't know, is this person is going to stand with me? Is they against me? What are they thinking about me? So this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning about trauma symptoms. It's being constantly alert, constantly worried. So when I work with my patients now, I would often ask them, do you feel physically safe? Do you feel emotionally safe? And both of them are a problem right now because someone might not feel physically safe. I mean, if you walk in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and after October 7th, you would not be physically safe as a Jewish person there. I mean, the FBI just today came up with an announcement that it's dangerous for Israelis to be visibly visibly Israeli, visibly Jewish in the United States. So physically they're not safe, but also emotionally they're not safe. And again, the problem is that it's starting in K-12, right? If your teacher is talking about a conflict and not in a trauma-informed, mindful way, that there might be Jewish people in the room or Israelis in the room, and they're showing a very one-sided narrative, like they've been doing in California and Massachusetts and other places around the US, then that's what kids are learning. They're learning to hate. They're learning a very one-sided narrative, and they're not learning critical thinking and how to think in nuances. And what's really interesting for me, again, as a Jewish person, Israeli, I always say, I am pro-Palestine and I'm pro-Israeli. I'm not pro-Hamas. I want them to be able to live safely. I just want my trauma and my pain to be acknowledged and not politicized, and not to hear, well, what about? No, right now it's Jews' Lives Matter, period. There's no after that. It's right now, every single report we see, the biggest hate crime is against Jews. So why can't people acknowledge that? Why does it go back to, well, we also need to talk about Islamophobia. Right? It's not the two sides of the same coins. Being Jewish is not the opposite of being Muslim. You should have training, especially as a mental health clinician, about every minority group and every marginalized group under racism, right? But when the society is putting us against each other, it's deepening the problem. Because again, you're going into the us versus them narrative, which makes it not a Jewish problem. I can't stress it enough. It makes it everybody's problem, because we're all going to be more vulnerable to extremism by doing that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Mars. And you're so right, Miri. And that's exactly, again, that's what we go through as ex-Muslims as well. When we try to tell our stories, immediately they go to the Islamophobia, but what about Muslims? And it's like, can we have a moment to talk about our experiences and our traumas? Like, do we matter at all? Are we even considered human in your view? You know what I mean? So I totally get that. And then not only that, but they are silencing you in order to elevate the voices of the people who want you dead. It's like, it could not possibly be more re-traumatizing. So we've got a question from somebody here who doesn't want to turn on their camera, and I'm going to read it out for them. They're asking, basically it's about anti-Zionists. So you kind of spoke about this a little bit in response to Mars' question, but when people do this kinds of thing, right, when they get involved with, Jewish Voices for Peace and those ilk, is that also a trauma response? Trying to be the last one to be eaten by the alligator, essentially. What can we do to reach people like that, like fellow, like your fellow Jewish people who are identifying as an anti-Zionist Jew? And yeah, so how can we help family members who are confused in this way is the question.
Short answer is education. because people think that Zionism is a political movement. They don't understand, I think, the connection between Jewishness and Zionism, and they're not saying being Jewish as an ethno-religion. They might be saying it just as a religion. There's a deep connection there between Israel and being Jewish. So part of it, like, is education and connecting them to a community, sense of belonging and sense of purpose. I think it's the tough thing for me is that, when I think about talking to people, it's where they are on that on a scale, like on the spectrum. Are they already over there and there's no one to speak with, and they're gonna be the one who would shout globalized Intifada and not on my name? Or are they somewhere in the middle where they can still have a conversation? I'm not going to waste my time on those people over there because there's no point. Other people will. For me, it's going to take too much of my emotional resources and it's not going to lead to any change. The one in the middle, the one on the fence, if I can humanize to them what it means to be a Zionist and why what they're doing is painful and hurting, I will go there. I would bring the stories to life. I would not flatten the Jewish identity, but I would embrace it and celebrate the pride of it. Is it coming from survival? I mean, maybe. I think some Jewish people these days would say that they're against Israel because they need to survive. I mean, on college campuses, we've seen a lot of students that they were asked to deny Israel right to exist just to be part of a lab or go to parties. So I think part of it is absolutely a survival. Yeah, it's everywhere, Yasmine. I think part of it is a survival mechanism, but for some people, I think it's internalized anti-Semitism, point blank.
Yeah, so we're fighting on many different fronts here, Miri. It's exhausting. I totally, my heart goes out to you for the work that you're doing. I appreciate you so much. Next, we've got Natalie. Natalie, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Yasmine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And sorry, I'm off camera. It's just the setting is all wrong. Hi, Miri. It's so great to hear you and talk about your experience. My question, and as a person who, I wasn't born in Israel, I immigrated to Israel when I was 13. And funnily enough, I actually immigrated from a place where I was being exterminated. I lived in Tajikistan. No one talks about that conflict. No one remembers that one. But when the Mujahideen came in, Jews knew they were the first one who are going to go. And that would be the better outcome for the Jews. And so when I came to Israel, it's funny, I was so identified with everything that was being said, like having the gas masks. Yes, but I actually had children and I actually had baby gas masks. So imagine how you need to pull yourself together. You have to put a mask on your baby. And when Yasmine said that, there's a minute and a half to get to the shelter. Yes, but I was living where I had 30 seconds to run to the shelter. And it was a completely mainstream city in Israel, middle of a road, like it's not a settlement or anything. It was just 30 seconds away, air distance from Gaza. So that's how you know. And you would be surprised how far a 6-month pregnant woman can run with a 4-year-old child on her hands to get to the shelter. You just find, and so, having done all of that, we now live in California. And my son is going off to college and I just cannot. And it's funny because, when you're talking about Jewish kids that are sort of not necessarily hiding their identity, but not being proudly Jewish, I find myself saying to my son the very same things that my mom told me, just be quieter. Okay, this is not the time. Just be a little. And I cannot believe it's been 30 years past. And I'm saying this to my son. I cannot believe this. And it's not Tajikistan. And it's not 1993. And yet, well, I mean, at least I have the skills. At least I know what to do, right? It's again that baby gas mask coming to get me. So my question is really going back to the question, why do you think the mental health field and the healthcare field in general, why is there so much anti-Semitism there? I mean, okay, they call it anti-Zionism. Fine, I'll take it. Why? Like, what makes it flourish specifically there? And sorry for the rant.
That's okay.
No,
That's okay.
Natalie, don't apologize
No
at all. Thank you
apologize.
so much. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing your story.
No apologies. I would say part of the problem is DAI never included Jews and has a very specific oppressor narrative and black and white thinking. And I mean, even me, when I went to grad school, I didn't make much out of it. There was, it was in diversity class. And I remember there was a discussion about the Middle East, and it was one student, and I still remember her name, I'm not going to say her name, that made very specific comments. And in my mind, oh, it's just for this one student, it's not an issue. When you do a deep dive, it is an issue. Under, again, the social justice framework, when you read the FBI reports, and I encourage everybody to listen to Lara Burns' podcast about Hamas, you understand exactly where it's coming from. It's been in the move, and especially when you think about mental health and other social justice movement, they think they're doing justice, but if you're excluding Jews, then it's not justice. It's the opposite of justice. So I think part of the problem is how we've been excluding Jews from all of those conversations, and even Jews themselves, we didn't see it as a problem until October 8th. But I'm going to actually make a comment about something you said, Natalie, about sending your kid to college. And I'm going to ask you something personal, which is tell them not to hide. As someone who also grew up with the notion of don't speak Hebrew in Europe and don't wear a Star of David, we cannot afford to hide who we are. We need to be proud and loud, because you never know the effect it has on the other Jew in the room. I know for myself, every time I see someone wearing a Star of David necklace, I'm like, oh my God, here's a safe person. They're okay, they're speaking up. Or if there's like a sign outside someone's house, United Against Anti-Semitism, like, okay, this is a safe house. If we hide who we are, they win, because they get to dehumanize us. They get to forget that we have a face and we have a name and we have a culture. We cannot afford to hide out of fear. We need to figure out a way to feel safe regardless of all the hate that is coming our way. We need to be proud and loud. There's just no other way.
Yasmine, can I respond, or is it?
Yes. No, go ahead and respond.
Okay. Yeah, Miri, I hear you. And the funny thing is that that's what I was back in Tajikistan. I would take the beating and I would give the beating. I didn't care. But for my son,
I get it. I get it.
I can't. I don't want to. Yeah.
Now you
It's
understand
sad.
your mother.
Exactly. Oh my God, yes. Cannot believe I'm saying that. I hated when she was being careful. I hated when she was, smile and just walk away when someone would curse, curse as a bygones, like a dirty Jew, not for her necessarily, but on the street, like a normal Tajik hate, nothing special. And I hated when she would just ignore it or just walk by. I hated it. And now I would do the same. Absolutely, I would do the same. That's horrible.
I get it. And this is intergenerational trauma. This is the epigenetic that we have.
Yeah. Thank you, Miri.
Just to follow up on what Miri was saying about wearing your Star of David and being a safe space for other people who are also feeling unsafe. I wanted to bring back a story from a man named Isaac who came on my podcast. He grew up in Iran, and he was telling us of how Jewish people would put a candle in their window so that other Jewish people would know this is a safe house to come to. And we're living that now, you guys. Like, we're talking, this is ridiculous. We're talking about the Islamic regime of Iran and Jewish people having to put a candle in their windows so that other Jewish people knew that that was a safe place to be. And now we're talking about, in the United States of America in 2025, leaving symbols and signals to each other so that Jewish people can know that it's safe.
History repeats itself.
Yeah. All right. Last but not least, the lovely Sarah. Please go ahead.
Hi, Miri. Hi, Yasmin. Sorry, emotional.
Yeah.
You say the Islamic Republic, Miri. I'm from Iran, and Yasmin talks about this so much, and it's just I was at Nova exhibit last night, and it feels like I've been crying ever since I walked in. And the question I have is mostly about trauma and healing. The problem is I've talked about this with Yasmine for a long time, and she's been a great part of my healing journey and helping me get better and helping me see who I am for real, not who I was told I am. And she has given me courage to try to heal. But I always say that healing for me is not a goal, it's a path, because I have come to understand that there's no way I'll be able to heal. I walked through the exhibit last night, and the thing that I cried, like I cried for a whole hour, and then I came home and I cried more, and then I woke up this morning, like it feels like I can't stop crying. And the shoes got me the worst. It's always the shoes that get me. But also somebody was saying Allah Akbar in the videos of the terrorists, because there are videos of the terrorists. And it's like, I was standing there for a minute. I told my husband, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And he had to walk me through that section. And it's like, somebody is saying the morning call to prayer. Somebody is getting hanged in Iran. And during the morning call, and that's what it means to me. It's not even terrorists, to me, that's what it means. And I feel like there's no hope for people like me to ever get better. Like, I try to be a witness, I try to be part of this healing journey, and but there's no hope for people like me because I'm getting dehumanized on a daily basis. I'm being told, Yasmine talked about this. I'm so sorry.
I apologize.
I'm tired of trying to teach my therapist what it means to be suffering from Islamic trauma. I'm tired of trying to, I've been in therapy for years, and I'm tired of trying to tell people and educate them. These are people I'm trying to reach out to help me, and then they come to me and say, oh, Sarah, I'm thankful that you're teaching me about these. I'm not here to teach you about these things. I need help. Help me get better. And I've come to this, this is the conclusion at this point, that there's no hope for people like me. I'll never get better. I'll just have to try.
Yeah. If there's no hope for people like you, that means I should be out of job. No, so
tell me there's hope. That's my whole question. Just tell me that there's hope.
Not only there's hope, you're actually living proof that there is hope, because guess what? You didn't stay over there paralyzed. You showed up. You're here today and you're talking. That tells me that you are not stuck on your healing journey. I think that there are some days that are going to be more difficult than others, because trauma is a scar. It's a scar. It's an invisible scar that will always be there. If I always tell my patients, I wish I had a magic wand that I can just erase what happened. No, it's about learning to live with those memories and thrive from them and finding the purpose and finding the meaning. And you today speaking up and sharing, you don't know what effect it's going to have on other people as well. And no, it's not your job to teach your therapist. It's their job to do their freaking research. But there is, I don't know if you ever read the book, The Choice, by Dr. Edith Eger, but this has been kind of like my Bible. She's a Holocaust survivor who is a trauma therapist. And she says, we cannot choose to vanish the dark, but we can choose to kindle the light. Shitty things are going to happen in the world. We've seen it again and again and again. We have absolutely no control over it. But we can choose what to focus on. And you can focus on your relationship with Yasmine and what you're doing in the podcast and your lovely husband that helped you go through the Nova exhibit and all the people in this community today, and finding a sense of belonging. We can shift it. It doesn't mean that the darkness is not going to be there, but you can choose if you're going to put a flashlight on it or not. You have control. You have a choice. You're in the front seat, not your past, not your trauma, not the people who shout Allah Akbar. You choose it. You can also, while they're shouted, you can listen to the birds in the background or the music, or just put the music on, full volume on, and just shut it down. You're in control. So I don't take there is no hope for people like you. I think you're the hope.
Thank you, Miri. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Yasmine.
Said, Miri. Thank you. And I understand the gravity of what Sarah was saying. Like, I get that from the depths of my soul. I feel it. You do get to these points where you just feel hopeless and helpless and just fucking exhausted with the state of the world. And what I like to say to myself, and what I like to remind Sarah to say to herself too, is think back to yourself 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, and talk to that Sarah and let her see who you are today. Her mind would be blown with pride, right? So when you start to think that you're stuck, or you start to feel like you're not healing, you're kind of getting a skewed reality. So if you think back and look at the timeline, you'll realize, oh, wow, this is amazing. Like past Sarah would never believe that this is where I am today. You know, and in 5 years' time, you're going to look back at this Sarah and you're going to ask her to look to the future, and she's going to feel the same way, and on and on and on, right? It's just that sometimes when you're in the moment, it feels so heavy and it feels so dark and it feels so terrifying and it feels so exhausting that can be overwhelming. So that might be a good exercise for you, honey, because you're so emotionally invested in this work, and your heart is so big that it's really, really obviously difficult for somebody as empathetic as you to be able to be involved in this kind of work and to not be affected on a daily basis. But like Miri was saying, that is why you are the hope, because you are doing this despite how difficult it is for you. And you are helping people all over the world every day that you don't even know about, right? And so you are the light that Miri was referring to. And you know what, Miri, thank you so much for the recommendation of that book as well, because I haven't read it in years, but I should go back and read it now, because that is an excellent book. Very difficult read, but very, very important, especially today.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, Miri, I just want to make sure that you've had a chance to say everything that you had to say, that you've shared everything you want to share. Maybe you've got some final words of wisdom for us, or you want to let us know where we can get your book, or how we can support Parents for Peace, or read more about your research, or anything at all. Please, you have the floor for the last word.
Goodness, there's so much. I feel like we already covered a lot. I would say spread the word about our helpline and Parents for Peace, so we can have people know about it. And if they're worried about their loved ones, they can get in touch with us. If you want to learn more about traumatic invalidation or radicalization, anti-Semitism, reach out. Always happy to talk about it in any capacity. And the power of doing, I mean, we can make a change. Each one of us can really make a change. Don't stop doing, not just for yourself. Yes, it will help you very much, because like I said, it is the antidote for trauma, but you never know who you're going to meet on the way. You never know who you're going to affect. You don't know the ripple effect of just being kind and seeing people as people. Stop seeing us as problems. Our power is stronger when we stand together. Let's stand together. We don't have any other choice. We need to fight this. I always say I'm doing it because of my grandparents and for my kids. Everybody has their own reason. We can't stop. We have to fight this together.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Miri. And thank you, everybody who came to join us here today and to meet Miri and support her. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Take care, everyone.